morning, evening, everybody out there just coming on tonight. Um, Appreciate everybody joining me. I know some people trickle on as the night progresses, but really wanted to go over a couple of things today. I was having some conversations with friends of mine in the paranormal community this week, and a few things actually came up that I really wanted to discuss. And we all know that there's some things going on in different locations, and historically, this is something that happens pretty routine, pretty common, where business owners end up expressing feelings, concerns, perspectives, opinions, and things like that that alienate and push away communities, right? And so, one of the things I think I appreciate about Get Haunted, particularly, is it's all about bringing the people in and bringing folks in and welcoming folks. Um, but what we've seen in the field over the past 12 months is multiple locations and individuals that seem to be determined to implode and determined to self-destruct on a very public stage. And I just wanted to have kind of a brief conversation and open the conversation for why this is occurring, why we think this is occurring, what we can do ourselves to make sure that we aren't following that kind of path, and really make sure that we're cultivating a space of inclusion, of acceptance, and appreciation for one another, because truly we have seen some terrible actions from people that historically haven't been terrible, right? And or that we haven't ever met, really, like we haven't ever interacted with, but we see these examples of poor behavior, poor decision making put out on very public display, and in a field where credibility and integrity, I think, play one of the most important roles in giving credence or giving, I don't know, giving a measure of reliability or credibility to what we're doing. To see a series of individuals, no less than 6 to my knowledge, in the past 12 months, really just self-destruct in a very public way, I think hurts the community as a whole, right? Like when we see someone go off the rails and start flipping out and swearing online, calling people names, and hey, Courtney, thanks for joining. And really just kind of showing their ass to the world. Um, I think it's I think it's really important that we talk about it, right? And I want to say that, I would like to talk about it in a very positive way, in a very, how can we make sure that we're healed and we're in a good enough space, that we aren't taking these kind of actions, right? Like that we are making sure that we're safeguarding ourselves and we're surrounding ourselves with people that are going to call us out when we start making these slides and these steps in the wrong direction, and start letting some of the external toxicity get inside of us so that we end up expressing it outward, right? And I think for me, that's mostly what I've seen, right? I've seen people get absolutely bogged down and mired in the shit of and I mean, it's all online, right? It's all digital. No one's walking up to anybody and saying these kind of things. But I've watched a lot of people get really hung up on what people are saying online and what communities are saying online, what individuals are kind of instigating. There was a website, a whole Facebook group dedicated to it that got shut down, and then they got restarted, and it was a place for people just to be angry, right? And to complain about other people and to kind of drag down other people and be negative about other people. And I think that there is a space to be negative, right? There's a space to not appreciate everybody. I think we as a society, as a species, really have gotten away from, good evening, Russ, have gotten away from the accountability of face-to-face interactions. Because I can tell you, I mean, I've read some things where it's just like, you would never say that in person. Like you would never have the audacity. You would never have the disrespect to say that to someone's face. But when we get online, the vitriol's real, right? Like the anger's real, the spit and venom constantly online, and just feeding that negativity. And then you have creators who are coming from a good place, right? Or coming from a less than good place, but from a professional place, right? Because they're treating it more of a business than a passion. or a hobby or as an enthusiast. And we watch them degrade very publicly in the paranormal field, right? Like we all have podcasts, we all have our Instagrams and our Facebooks and our little groups and things like that. And we share our journeys with each other pretty frequently. And we just see time and time again, these people get overwhelmed with the negativity and overwhelmed with the negative messages that are coming out of very specific camps. Um, and then they implode, right? They just publicly tear themselves apart. And there's been a few of them, honestly, that I couldn't care less, watched a couple of public meltdowns that I genuinely thought to myself couldn't happen to a better person. But at the end of the day, we as just humans, right? Like as individuals that are existing here, um, we need, yeah, Arthur, it's true. That is very true. There are trolls among us, right? Um, but we need to make sure that although we may feel vindicated, we might feel justified, we might feel empowered to appreciate someone we don't like's fall. We can never lose the humanity of empathy for someone that is clearly not equipped to handle the level of scrutiny, public interaction, or notoriety that they received. And this really good example is and I'm not using the very obvious example of people that have been criticized for fake techniques. That I'm not even going to speak to that. I've never met them. I've never actually seen them do what they do. I've got no opinion on that. However, I have seen somebody else get really railed into for how they do things, how they investigate. And they were picking up a little bit of steam on YouTube, and they were picking up a little bit of steam on Facebook, and they were starting to get a little bit bigger of a following, and they couldn't handle the pressure. And they felt like they had to really create an experience to stay relevant and to keep their followers entertained and to keep the views and the likes and the shares up. And so while they got everything they deserved, getting torn down for bullshit practices, the empathy in me requires me to note that there was an underlying reason they did it, because they didn't start like that, right? They didn't enter the field wanting to be fraudulent. They didn't enter the field wanting to be false or fake or just overproduced, but they weren't getting the evidence they wanted, and they felt like they had something to deliver. And so they imploded. They didn't accept who they were entirely, right? They didn't have a healthy self-image. They didn't have a healthy respect for themselves. And they started basing their ego and their self-worth on the clicks, on the likes, on the shares, on the views. And that's when things start to fall apart for the people that are content creators, right? And then you have people that have locations. We had a recent location have a complete meltdown on a very digital, a very visible platform. That person was struggling. Hey, whoa, Joe. That person was struggling. I don't know them personally. I don't know what their journey's been. I don't know what their perspectives are. I've been to the location. I had a very pleasant time at the location. The people that were working there were very pleasant, very kind, very welcoming. But there's history there that I don't know. So maybe that allows me to be a little bit more distanced, right? Be a little bit more uninformed about what the scenarios are. But having never met the person, having been to the location and felt the energy there, that person was struggling with dealing with criticism. And that's my only guess is they couldn't handle the critiques, the attacks, the things that the negative side of everything we're doing, right? And I've been laughed at, especially by family and friends, like, you do what? That's dumb, that's stupid, right? But at the end of the day, I have a very firm grasp of who I am and what I enjoy and why I enjoy it. And I would actually like to invite anyone watching to come on up, just DM me or just say, hey, I want to come up. right in the chat and share a little bit about your experience. Have you ever run into that? Have you ever felt that pressure? Have you ever felt that negativity flow in? I know Wojo and and Richie B probably have. I'd imagine they probably get laughed at or mocked or torn down online because they're out there hunting for Sasquatch. And I'm sure there's probably more non-believers than believers in that range, similar to other paranormal fields. But it really is a situation, guys. We've all experienced it to some degree or another, whether it's, one of the things I actually had a conversation. I'm not going to say who. If you are out there, you and I had this conversation. If you want to come up and talk about it, you can feel free to, but you don't have to. We were talking about when we're on StreamYard, right? We have this little ticker right up there, right? And that tells me how many people are liking and viewing, right? And he and I had this conversation about how many views they had. And I asked, what does it matter? I hop on here, I have 0 viewers for like the first 5, 6 minutes of my lives. And then it gets up to like 4 or 5 or 6. And I think my biggest number ever was like 14 people watching me. Right. But I'm not here for all those numbers. Like if I had 1,000 people watching, I don't know that I would be me still. I think I would feel that pressure to perform. And like right now, it just dropped. It just went from 8 to 5. And you can't let that kind of stuff phase you. But I do want to address a question here. Arthur, you said here, how do you call out the fakers? Why, unless they're pretending to be some kind of authority with me or people I care about or anything like that, what does it matter? Right? Yeah, exactly. Exactly, Wojo. We got to ignore the noise. So calling out fakers, and I want to make this clear. This is just my opinion, right? The only reason I can really think of like calling somebody outright fake is so that I can feel right. So that I can be superior and I can say, I know you're faking. You're the fake. I'm real. I'm keeping it pure. Because we are investigating we are hunting, investigating, experiencing, exploring a world that is so alien to us, so outside of our typical perception, right? And there are entertainers in every field, right? So Arthur, like if you think about it, right? The Harlem Globetrotters. Arthur, and please chime in if you're familiar with the Harlem Globetrotters. If you aren't familiar with the Harlem Globetrotters, right? The Harlem Globetrotters are actors who can play basketball. They are performers. They are entertainment. But we aren't boycotting their shows saying you're not real basketball players. You're not playing the game correctly. No one's coming out of the stands because someone on the Harlem Globetrotters double dribble or travel or shoulder check a little too long or don't follow the standard rules of basketball, right? They're entertainers. And for me, I think when you start pushing a narrative of I'm going to call them out because they're faking or they're manipulating or they're doing whatever, I think the easiest way to call them out is just to call them an entertainer. You're a performer. You're an entertainer. And honestly, truthfully, like if we look at the journey through the paranormal, a lot of newer people have, their introduction to the paranormal is through those entertainers, is through those performers, right? And it's when they start looking into what those entertainers are doing and start getting some experiences on their own that they start questioning the validity of those entertainers, right? Okay, I agree with you, Ian, but there are some people who set their narrative within our field who have no business saying a word. Bob, I'm gonna be a little confrontational on this one because I didn't realize I didn't and I'm gonna be a little bit sarcastic too. I never got invited to the Paranormal World Community Decisioning Committee. Um, our field is so shattered, broken, divided, separated, and tribal that I don't know that any one person has ever set the tone or set the narrative for anything. If anything, we're going to look at ghost hunters as the ones that set the tone for the field. If we want to, if we want to look at anyone, the show Ghost Hunters on Discovery was what set the tone. That's what blew up the paranormal investigation in the US. That's what really drove interest and like sparked all these other spin-off shows and spin-off communities and people getting together and creating teams, right? And so they were around before. I'm not saying they weren't around before, but as far as mainstream goes, it really wasn't, right? And as far as the Harlem Globetrotters are not real, we know they're entertainers. Arthur, you're saying that as a grown adult. If I take my 6-year-old out there, he doesn't know that it's not basketball. He doesn't know that it's not a game. He thinks it's just a really goofy team who's just that much better than the Generals, and he can't figure out why the Generals can't get their shit together to score a point. And by the time he's 15, 16, 17 years old, he's going to know and he's going to see them for what they really are. I was never told that the Harlem Globetrotters were fake. No one sat me down and had to explain to me that the Harlem Globetrotters weren't real. The moment I started experiencing basketball a little bit for myself, I knew they were fake. I knew they weren't real, right? And so I think the fakers and the entertainers are more influential for the people that aren't in the field than the people that are. Because the people that are in the field all know, right? The people that are in the field know that when someone says, knock twice, oh, they knocked. Oh, they knocked again. That's, we know, right? Or if a shadow goes behind me, right? Like, let me see. Yeah, I'm here by myself. It's so weird. I don't know what that did you see that dangling thing on my camera? That was an orb. Yeah, Arthur, sure. I'll let you in here. Let me pull you up. If I can figure out how to do this. Arthur, shoot me a message on Get Moderated um, on Facebook. I'll go ahead and get you the link over there. Be happy to bring you up. But I think that situation is really kind of just a it's not it's not super helpful. Like I think okay, so that's a little bit different, Denise. When someone starts claiming professional or medical credentials, you're violating a different level of trust, right? You're violating a different code of conduct than the paranormal community. Um, you're violating something far, far more important. Um, I the people that claim to be certified counselors, the people that claim to be certified like psychiatric professionals and things like that, unacceptable. I think when you have evidence that someone is not, and there is clear evidence that it is not, um, then yeah, you have every right to just tear that down. Because that's like, I mean, it's not quite stolen valor. It's not quite impersonating an officer. However, if I were to open up a clinic and I were to claim I was a certified counselor and I were to start seeing patients or I would start seeing clients, that's a legal offense I've done. You've committed an actual crime. Like that is an actual crime that someone is committing by impersonating a medical professional. Yeah, and I mean, Bob, I think that's somewhat my point here, right? You started out in the field believing everyone, then learned to a point what is so and what is not. And my point is, there's some people who cloud up the day when there is no need. Totally agree with that. Totally agree with that. Um, and I think your experience and your journey through that is the example I'm actually saying, right? The people that start getting involved more and they start coming into the field more know who the liars are, know who the fakers are, know who the performers are. Um, and Arthur, I just want to make sure you got that message from me. I did respond with the link to come up to the stage and speak a little bit. And I think we need to remember through that process, although we may feel that there's a breach of trust right there, we may feel like there's a violation. We got to look at why it happened, right? We can't just accept it for what it is. All right, I got Arthur here. He's got some things to say. Looking forward to it. It's probably going to be very confrontational with me.
Hello.
Hey, Arthur, welcome aboard.
Thanks. Yeah, very interesting. This is the first time I've seen your podcast, and I was just snooping around and I saw it. And yeah, I have some pretty strong opinions for and against, but I just jumped on it, didn't even comb my hair.
Ah, me neither.
But yeah, we're talking about whether or not you dine them out, the fakers or the ones that are making trouble. In my opinion, we should call them out. Not saying I'm right and anyone who disagrees with me is wrong. It's just different opinions, right? Um, but I think we should call them out. I've written books on bullying. I've been to elementary schools, high schools, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts. I go all over the place talking about bullying. I've had a brother commit suicide because he was bullied. I had other relatives. I had other soldiers within the unit. A lot of them commit suicide because a lot of bullying and people just picking on them. And one of the major themes of all of this is they do nothing. They don't do anything about it. So the bullying continues. It just keeps going and going and going. Same thing here. Once I got into the paranormal community, I saw that it's very similar to what I had to deal with when I was hired.
High school.
High school. It's like perpetual high school.
And I guess if you don't mind me jumping in real quick,
sure.
Because we're bringing in a much larger conversation, right? We're bringing in that conversation of bullying, and I will accidentally go all over the place, right? And so tonight I really want to discuss how, like, the motivations between people imploding, right? And the negative reaction they're getting that they're paying attention to, which usually leads to that implosion, right?
Right.
And so when we talk about calling people out and we say we need to call them out on being fakers.
Yeah.
And now I'm just asking that when we see someone that's doing things that we don't think are legit and we don't think that are real, that we just throw that label of entertainer on them. Right? You're an entertainer. You're a performer. Wouldn't call you an investigator. You're a performer. And you're going to have your space and you're going to perform. Because the reason I ask that is actually very in line, but on the other side of what you're saying.
Okay.
When we empower the masses, when we empower thousands, hundreds of thousands of people to hop online and we say, call them out when they're fake. And you have 100,000 people watching a YouTube video that aren't in the room, that don't know what's actually happening, that don't have experience because they're not actually investigators. They're not in the field. They're just online watching people in the field, creating an unfounded opinion. When we say call them out unilaterally with no general arbitration, with no conscious concept of what is real, what isn't, what is not, right? We now empower the masses to become that bully. Because if me and 25 of my guys don't like the way that you investigate and we think it's bullshit because you stare into a scrying screen and you write, and we think it's all nonsense and we think that you're just researching the location before, and now I rally the troops to call you out and to
Yeah.
call you fake, and you might not be. And you may have spent the past 15 years honing these kind of skills, really dedicating yourself to your particular practice. And now we've empowered a bunch of people who don't have experience in the field to now become the arbiters of what is true and what is real.
Yeah, but that's not what I'm talking about, though. I'm saying, like, when you talked about knocking, then you put the screen down, then you show when there is uh, evidence that it's fake. Then I think you have to protect the industry. You have to protect your fellow paranormal investigators, and call these particular people out, not just because you don't agree with them, but I mean, for those that you absolutely know, and you have to do some research, because after all, we're all investigators, right? I mean, that's what we're calling ourselves. So investigate those that are saying, I just I'm doing an investigation, and then you catch the little wires hanging up, or
Mhm.
whatever. Then you bust them out, because you have, in my opinion, you have to protect our hobbies, or our some of us make a living off of it, right? So you have to call out and protect our livelihoods, or protect the industry, protect our hobbies, because you have these people coming in and making a fool of what we believe in. I think those are the individuals. You got to bust those people out, not those that we just don't like or we don't agree with. Those are the entertainers, but those fakers, I think, should be called out as fakes.
Yeah, and so this to me, this falls into, I think, not the what but the how, right? And I think that's where you and I aren't connecting,
Yeah,
because I don't disagree. I think having the people that are faking evidence, especially the people that are pulling false histories, we need a different category for them.
okay,
And
yeah.
that to me is the entertainer. You're
Well,
not
or the
here.
faker. I would call it the
Well,
faker.
but what is an entertainer? An entertainer is someone that's just doing something to entertain, right?
Yeah,
And so for me, calling someone an entertainer does allow me to have a degree of high ground, right? Because I'm not becoming spiteful, I'm not getting into name calling. And when I call you an entertainer, it shouldn't be an insult unless
yeah.
you aren't an entertainer.
But somewhere you would have to define what an entertainer is for
Someone who is broadcasting, producing, or creating material for the explicit intent of entertainment. That's it. I mean, that is, if you are explicitly creating things to entertain, whether it's false evidence, hyper reactions. My favorite is the hyper reactions. I'm sorry. I love watching those videos. I think
yeah,
they're hilarious. They're like watching people getting hit by dodgeballs. It's one of the funniest things to me. I never take them serious. I never think they're real. And if one of them ever showed up in an investigation I was at, I would immediately be like, why were you and I both invited to the same event?
yeah,
Like, no offense to what you're doing. You're creating entertainment. You're a content creator. You're doing your thing, right? You're out talking to your people,
yeah,
but you're not actually investigating. Like, you're just out here reacting to things. You're creating situations. And for me, I think that when we get so hung up on purifying the space, we forget that every other space, every other hobby, every other thing has their pretenders, has their posers, has their fakers.
yeah,
And every other field and every other thing just kind of look at the fakers and go, fuck, like, get out of here. Just get the hell out of here. They don't
yeah,
take it as a personal attack. So I follow a bunch of different things. I have a wide variety of hobbies. Woodworking is one of the big ones. And woodworking is one of the ones that I aspire that our group, our field could mimic. And when you see a do-it-yourselfer woodworker around an actual woodworker, there is no conversation about you bought pre-finished wood, or you bought pre-cut molding, or you didn't actually build out the molding on that table. You're faking it. Like, you just glued it on. You didn't do the right thing. You like,
Yeah.
and that's their faking, right? That's their false. That's their false signals. That's their overreactions. That's their pretending, right? They'll just go up to them and say, like, oh, if you spent like an hour, you could have actually carved that out yourself. And this is the tool that you would use to do it. And this is how you would actually do it. And so instead of addressing the fake aspect of what they're doing as fake,
Yeah.
they try to teach them how to do it not fake. And that's how they talk about the thing that was faked. So, like, if I fake the knock or whatever, right? Or I fake an EVP, or I fake something like that, the parallel would be like, oh, well, if you listen to that EVP and you maybe changed your questions, you might actually get a real response. And just talking past the fact that you just called it fake, right? And you called them out for it being fake. And that I think is super fun. And I'm a big nerd. There's like all sorts of like D&D stuff in the background, sci-fi stuff in the background. And one of my favorite things ever, especially when I think about stuff like this, is are you familiar with Doctor Who at all?
No.
Okay. Are you familiar with the concept of Doctor Who? Alien running around saving the world.
I've heard of it, but I don't know. I've lived a pretty sheltered life.
That's fair. So he was really pissed off at a politician once. And he said, I will take you down with 6 words. Right? 6 words. Doesn't she look really tired now? And that became the headline across all the newspapers. Doesn't she look tired now? And I feel like if we start moving towards they're an entertainer, not an investigator, that's the same thing. I think that if we stop trying to purify the space and we just quarantine the space and say, you'll have your YouTuber who's going to go into a location and just absolutely bullshit their experience. And they're going to get 250,000 views. They're going to get 450,000 views. They're going to get 1 million views. And then that location is going to get the notoriety. And that's okay. And we need to be okay with that. Now, those YouTubers should never be hired to go speak at a paranormal conference. And they never should be like the spokesperson for actual paranormal investigation. But we can let them be out there advertising for us as the fakers, right? And then when they come in, I help run 2 different locations, and I've hosted 5 or 6 different overnight, like not overnight, but late night investigations where people asked me about things they saw on TV, things they saw on YouTube. And that was a great teaching moment. It was like, yeah, those are so interesting, right? Because they're amazing and they're fake, right? No one's coming up and tousling your hair at Heart Stuff Hall. Our location has never had anything like that happen. I've never had a personal experience there, nor has the 12 people that maintain the property. It just doesn't happen there. You'll hear footsteps. You'll have K2 EMF. There we go. Yeah. You'll have EMF reaction to questions and things like that. You'll have yes/no boxes work there. But you're not going to get the kind of thing that you see on Ghost Hunters International on Discovery at 2 a.m. Like, it's just not going to happen. Not only because they're spending massive production budgets and absurd hours in getting footage and getting material to show in a 30-minute period, but they also have an intent to entertain.
Yeah.
Right. So, and I think that to me, I think that is also some of the issue with these folks that have been imploding lately. I don't know. Are you familiar with the location that had a recent episode? I don't want to say the name. But
I hear a lot, but just like how you just said, I don't want to. Somebody will say, I don't want to give names. So I only get little pieces. Only the
yeah,
people in the know actually know about it. But I think that's part of the problem. Nobody talks about it, so therefore the problem doesn't go away.
yeah. So I sent you a private message about it, but um, they had a very public episode, and I don't know the person. I don't know what their journey is, what their struggle is, or anything like that.
Yeah,
Um, but I do know what they were addressing in that post. And there was some some very clear insecurities, some very clear hostility, anger, frustration that was
yeah,
being expressed. They did it in a very poor way. They didn't do it in a very professional way whatsoever. But this is someone that is in an entertainment business. And like it, love it, whatever, when you are a location, you are in an entertainment business. You may be a legitimate investigator, but your location is providing entertainment and outlet for those that can actively investigate.
yeah,
And so you have to be, um, yeah, this is a great one. Denise Empey. Locally, there's a spot that's a very active demonic morgue. The place has never been a morgue. Um, when it's been mentioned, folks get blocked or banned and called haters. And so I think that is another really good example of quarantining a good candidate for quarantining.
yeah,
You know, I don't go to a haunted a ghost, a haunted house, ghost house in October expecting to be real ghosts, right? And
yeah,
they'll spook me, and they have the tricks in the houses and everything like that, where the cabinets will wiggle and everything like that. And there's actually one that's actually known for it. They're very open and honest about it. I think they call it the poltergeist house or something like that, where you can go and they simulate all this different paranormal activity stuff.
yeah,
Um, but that's for entertainment only, and we are only beholden to treat something as credible if we feel as though it's credible.
yeah,
We are beholden to act with empathy. We are beholden to act with decency and respect. And I can completely hate what you're doing, address that I don't like what you're doing and that I hate what you're doing without being disrespectful. And I
yeah,
think when we empower the mob to call out the fakers and we use intentionally aggressive and assaultive language, that's what we're encouraging. And I think we're better than that as a field. I think we're better than lowering ourselves to the people that are faking to their level, because that's shit they do. Really good example, like right here, what Denise was saying, that the last few words there, folks get banned, blocked, and called haters.
yeah,
Right? That is what a faker is doing in response to someone calling them out. So then what do we do in response to that? Oh, you're going to call me a hater? You're going to block me? Fuck you. I'm going to write 18 different reviews about your place. Right?
yeah,
And so now we get into this cycle where now we've been brought into the shit. We've been brought down to the mire. We've been brought down to that bully's level. And the only way, when you get down there, the only way to fight fire is with fire. And so now it's who's going to be less mature, who's going to be less professional, and who's going to be less respectful. And that's who's going to win this argument. One of
yeah,
my favorite things is just disregarding somebody as an entertainer. That
yeah.
pisses people off 6 hours after they hear it, not in the moment.
Yeah. No, I totally get it. Maybe my skill set used like in the political arena is different than the paranormal community. For instance, I was a opposition researcher up in the Pacific Northwest. I had politicians recalled. I had politicians, once they saw that I was looking into them, they would quit their races. I've had uh, the governor of Washington State had 4 press conferences just to address me. You know,
Yeah, and I think that in that space, and I come from, I'm a politics guy myself. That's the space I come from. I'm on the East Coast though, not up in the Northwest. Maybe we do things a little different out here. But my experience is politicians typically at least have to pretend to have more decorum than people in our field do.
Yeah. But when
Now,
I
when the
call
door
them out,
closes, when the
but
door closes and you're in the office with them one-on-one, wildly
yeah,
different. But
yeah.
when we hit the public, their handlers and their PR team are going to handle the interactions with the public. They aren't the ones typically that are
But
doing
with
it.
the politicians though, when I would call them out
Yep.
they would respond by disappearing in great majority of the time. And so they don't like to be called out, so they disappear.
And in our field, they react and they try to strike back.
Yeah.
In the paranormal, people don't just disappear. They don't give up their followings. There's way too much ego on it. And I think in the political space, there's always a revival, right? There's always that chance to come back to relevance and let this blow over. And for whatever reason in our space, everyone wants to address everything in the first 30 seconds of it happening.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think a really good example of that, the one I sent you the message about.
Yeah.
There were 387 messages on that post within the first hour of it going live. 387 messages in an hour. Like, that is, I mean, for our field and for our very small niche space,
yeah,
that's CNN running the story before it's even reviewed. And so, it's tough. Yeah, Damien, it is. It comes down to paranormal. It comes down to public image.
Yeah.
Well, I think, Denise, the people that disappear from the paranormal are usually going out in far larger spectacles than just like a Facebook post or a public implosion. The ones that disappear usually are explosions. And maybe were of mid to low tier notoriety before they popped off and disappeared.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I still have a lot to learn. I've only been doing this for a few months. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm not saying I'm wrong. I just need to adjust and try to figure it out.
And Arthur, again, I'm not saying you're wrong either. This is just my perspective. This is how I approach it.
But if we have
What's that?
If there's so many of these, they're exploding, or then maybe how the paranormal community is dealing with it isn't working. So
I actually have another. I'll eventually do it when I get the green light from Rob and Sarah. I want to talk about mental health in the paranormal, and are people healthy to begin with when they take on these roles of responsibility and they take on these public personas?
Yeah.
Because again, I think a difference in the political spectrum versus the paranormal, I think there's a lot more firm attachment to sense of self, especially in early political careers, than in the paranormal. But that's a whole nother 2-hour podcast about mental health and how we approach things.
Yeah. Well, I've noticed a lot of that too, watching a lot of podcasts and listening to people give a little bio about themselves. I see patterns and behavioral and mental health issues.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough, especially so I'm only a couple of years in myself. I'm not this long-standing pillar of the community. I joke all the time, I'm a nobody. Rob gets really pissed when I say that, but I'm a nobody in the paranormal. Nobody pays me to come speak. Nobody pays me to come watch. I pay my rental fees just like everybody else to go to different events and places.
Yeah.
But the truth is I'm coming in from a very corporate and political perspective. And so I'm seeing different trends in this field that I've seen analogs to in my previous experiences. And there's, I don't know how many 1099s you've worked with on projects.
Yeah.
But even if they are contract employees, I like to call them liaisons or consultants.
Yeah.
And they get all pissed off. Like, I'm a contract worker. I'm not a consultant. It's like, all right, well, when you're done telling me what needs to do, what's going to happen? Where are you going? Right? Like you're a consultant, like you're in one door out the other. Um, and I see some of it in here, right? Like you have people that get paid to be places and they want to keep that momentum and they want to keep that notoriety and everything like that. And then they get hit with a couple of curveballs and they take a little bit of criticism they didn't anticipate, and they didn't have the time for self-reflection or self-solidification. And that just, and they crumble, and you watch them fall apart. Sometimes it's slow, sometimes it's long. But it's always tragic.
So, quick question. So, if you have some of these the enthusiasts or these entertainers that you call them, and they are going after you or those like within the Get Haunted network that are legit, how do you defend yourself, or do you just allow it?
Well, I think, and Rob and I have had I've talked with Rob about that. I was actually on one of his podcasts when he talked about it. I think anytime, if you're legitimate, right, unless you have a pretty severely tractioned event that is criticizing you, where there is decent evidence or at least some kernel of truth to the initial claim that is snowballed out of control, then I think addressing it's really important, right? Because then you take the gas out of the situation. Similar concept of like admitting to the lesser crime, like, you know, like, yeah, no, I didn't actually sink the USS Salem, but I did investigate there and I did kick the dock. But when there is just real baseless bullshit, I think the more you talk about it, the more you're platforming the troll.
So you're okay with defending yourself, but not necessarily going on the offense.
No, I think going on the offense does nothing but create a platform and creates a dialogue with somebody you don't want to dialogue with.
Yeah.
It's very hard to play ping pong when no one else is holding a paddle, right? Like, so if you're not returning the ball and you're just grabbing the ball and not letting it hit you and walking away, the game's done. And the reality is most of these people, most of the, like, Rob's dealt with it a bit, Get Haunted's dealt with it a bit with a guy over in Europe. Well, they did a response to his video, and then he did a response to their response. And so now you have 120,000 views. That's getting traction now because there's a response to my video. So now I'm going to do a response to that response. And now all of my followers are going to watch this one. And you're creating the cycle, and they're bringing you down to their level, and they're miring you in their shit. And the reality is, the more credible you are, the more respectful you are, the more like decent you are, the more you're going to lose that cycle. You don't come out of it clean. You don't come out of it winning, because either you won the argument and you lost a very important part of yourself, or you lost the argument.
Yeah.
There's no winning in that circumstance. So I also am wildly unaware of people's criticism of me. Like, it is, I am so, like, I know they're out there. Yeah, and that's another thing, Denise. Yeah, one of the things Rob does, he'll invite them onto a show. Like, come on, talk to me, tell me what's wrong. And no one ever comes, right? And it's because that would be an impossible dialogue for them to win, because you're inviting them, you're being the bigger person. Like, come have a conversation with us. Let's not make this an attack. Come to one of our events. Come experience it for yourself, and then you can walk away. And then you can say whatever you want to say. That's a really good way of handling it too. I just don't have anywhere I would invite them. I invite people over to the Heart Stuff Hall, which is where we have a location. They're going to think I'm trying to kill them. It is a rundown old building, and it is not in a great neighborhood.
Yeah.
So, not to dissuade anyone from ever renting the Heart Stuff Hall, if you ever need to, warnerparanormal.com. But no, I think that I really do think that the dialogue with fakers and critics and things like that, a dialogue just only opens the opportunity for you to lower yourself. And so the quarantining for me is key.
Yeah.
But I do like your take on it. I don't think it's a bad perspective. It's just not my flavor. And And so I also understand very much people that very do feel very passionate about this field and feel very passionate about what they do. I completely understand the energy that overtakes you and just makes you want to like go rabid and just attack every person that you see, discrediting the field and harming the integrity of those that are actually doing it. So I don't want it to seem like I don't understand that side. I genuinely do. Like I really do understand it. It's just not my cup of tea.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. Everybody has different opinions. Some people want to just contain their opposition or contain them. Others want to eliminate them.
Yeah.
Because if you contain them, they're always going to be there. Look at North Korea. They've been around for
Yeah.
53 years. We've just
The
been,
Democratic Republic.
We just been dealing with it. But eventually, you're going to have to pop them in the nose.
Yeah.
And it will be over. But it's going to be to the point where you can't pop them in the nose anymore because now they got nukes, right? So we waited too long. So you don't deal with these entertainers, and they're going to be becoming so popular that no one's going to deal with any of us real investigators, because now we are now smaller in the market and they're the big in the market, and no one knows who we are now.
Well, I think my question to you then, right? So they're going to be bigger in the market with people that aren't doing real investigations, right? Because they're going to be following the fake stuff.
Right.
That wasn't our market anyway.
Yeah.
That wasn't our market at all anyway. And in fact, the bigger their market share of the people that enjoy the fake shit, the bigger that gets. There is a little side funnel and there's a little spill off from when they get 100,000 people, right? They get 1,000, they get 1,500, they get 16, 1,700 that want to experience something real, and they don't want the bullshit. And so, if anything, the bigger they get, the more they feed us. And I would look at it like, honestly, I wouldn't necessarily look at it as North Korea and the U.S. You might look at it like Canada and the U.S., right? Like as the U.S. expands and gets bigger and bigger and bigger economically, there's a lot of economic spillover into Canada. Not 50%, not 70%, but it is like 1 to 5% of Canada's GDP is American GDP, right? And so, yeah, social media followers don't fill seats in person, right? And I think that's another major thing too. For those of us that do in-person events, I never worry about how many followers somebody has like that, because followers on YouTube aren't there when you need them. They're not physically there ever. And I mean, it's just, I don't know. It's a tough spot. I did the opposite and avoided everybody, cut myself off and hid. I've missed so much being solo sometimes. Oh yeah. And Damien, a lot of people do. And Arthur, as you come up and you experience it, a lot of people break away from groups and never go back. They only deal with themselves and they only go that. And it's because they have that negative experience, right? And they have that experience with fakers, or they joined a team that isn't of high integrity, and they catch teammates doing things and they try to get it set. Oh, this is a good one. What about the vendors selling equipment to gullible people who the entertainers say is great but sucks in reality, and these people pretend to be our or the community's friends? So I am a big believer in the burden of the consumer. Arthur, I don't know how you feel about that. But I think that people that blindly purchase things without doing research or having experience with the equipment themselves, they're not looking at the bottom of the hole before jumping in. And that's just me. I know my wife probably disagrees. I know probably most of my friends disagree. But I think that there is a level of due diligence you should do before you purchase any equipment.
Yeah.
Like I mean, And to be fair, novelty sellers will always be your friend. The snake oil salesman's not your enemy until you try to return it. So, like, it's, we have carpetbaggers. We do. We genuinely, in the field, we do. And it sucks because I watch new people fall into that trap. And funny enough, that's how I got into the paranormal. Is a very good buddy of mine, Matt Warner, had a little device with him. I was at a bachelor party, and they wanted to do this ghost hunt for the bachelor party. Exactly, the $600 Boo Buddy bear. Like, you're buying goofy stuff at that point. You're buying a teddy bear with an EMF and a voice box in the same. And so we were up at this event, and Matt was hosting it, and he was doing everything. And he had a little music box. It was a little multi-spectrum motion sensor and thermal sensor music box. And I was walking by, and he got very defensive over it. It was a very small piece of equipment. And he's like, "Oh, be careful, be careful." And I was like, "Why? Like, what?" And he goes, "That's really expensive." And so I'm thinking like $100 because I'm looking at it, and it's got to be $100. It was like $400. And when I went online to look for it, yeah, $450, $400, somewhere in that range for everything. Between Tiger Direct and Alibaba, by, I want to say, like less than a month later, I had built one for $29. And that was how I got into the field. And so, yeah, they're gonna get you. I have a couple of pieces of equipment that I got. Not gonna lie, I got. It looked cool. I thought it would be fun. And yeah, and it just didn't work out. And it's a buyer beware type situation.
I went to a flea market, and some guy was having crystals, selling crystals, and he had a bunch. And this is like 30 years ago. It was quite a while ago. And he had some tomato plants, and he had these crystals. Some crystals he had in plants, and some of the plants didn't. And the tomato plants with crystals were nice and big tomatoes. And he says, "Oh, you have to buy my crystals, and you could put them in there, and you have nice tomatoes." Well, the other tomatoes that he had were just all ugly and wilted and sick. Yeah. And I says, "You're so full of shit. You're just not watering these." And you can see that those with the crystals had water. He goes, No, I didn't do that. It's, yes, you are. You're doing that.
Yeah, the soil is dry and crumbling.
Yeah, it's like you're not giving water to these. It has nothing to do with the crystals. And so, I think there's a lot of that as well. No, buyer beware.
There definitely is, because crystals are one of the things that I think is. I enjoy. I like rocks. Like, I just like rocks and geology. So I love crystals. Like, I think it's just cool. Yeah. The way that crystals actually grow and develop scientifically are interesting to me, and things like that. And my wife and one of our good friends both actually they believe crystals have some kind of innate power. And so I joke all the time, like, all right, you got your pocket rocks, like, and in a teasing fashion, right? But on the same token, like, I can't really criticize them too much, because it's a comfort for them, right? Like, they feel like they're getting some kind of thing out of it. So whatever. And my concession is, whenever my wife wants crystals, we go to the warehouse that's like an hour and a half away, and we go to a wholesaler, and we get it there. Because like they have like a minimum purchase of like $100, which is like, if you've ever looked into what crystals are now, that's like 2 crystals now. But we can get a whole pallet load of stuff for like $150 now. And so that's the concession. But yeah, no, they do. They overcharge. And the crystal game, there's a lot of people in the crystal game that try to play the consumer pretty heavily.
My brother has a crystal mine in Arkansas, and he has, like, he makes the world's ugliest jewelry, but people love it. To me, it's ugly, but but
to them, it's beautiful.
he
Right?
makes
To them,
yeah,
it is
he makes a
absolutely
good living
beautiful.
by selling this stuff. And I was like, oh
Yeah.
my God, who would wear that? But people buy it, they
Mhm.
love it. So what's mean that it's ugly to somebody else?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, and he could look at that crystal and say, tell you exactly everything about it, what it's good for, uh, what what spirits is caught in it, all
Oh,
sorts of
yeah.
stuff. And he's
Yeah.
really, really into it.
Yeah. And the people that are, you can tell there's a genuineness to them.
Yeah.
And then there's people that put them into tomato plants and forget to water them. Uh,
Yeah.
but Arthur, thank you for joining me tonight. It is my time. We have other shows coming on the Get Haunted Network right now, and I don't want to split audience or push anybody one way or the other way. But Arthur, thank you so much for coming
Thank
on.
you.
I
Yeah.
hope you have a wonderful evening. I appreciate your
You too.
contribution to the conversation today. And keep a lookout. We'll be on pretty much weekly. Do skip a couple weeks here and there. Um, but
Okay.
Arthur, I'm gonna put you back into the back room here, and I'm
Okay.
gonna do my sign off. Thank you.
All righty.
All right, so guys, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I greatly appreciated the conversation developed very wonderfully, and I appreciate again thank you to Arthur and all of you on the side here for jumping in and really contributing to the conversation because truthfully, like I have my opinions, but I actually genuinely enjoy hearing what everybody has to say, and I do like hearing and learning from all of you as well. So please, 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 please go over to Get Moderated over on Facebook, throw up some ideas, tell me what you guys want to talk about next. Because if you leave it to me, I don't know where we're going to go. But thank you, stay blessed, and treat each other well.